What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you an update to one of my favourite decks, and that is of course Darkworld. Now, a lot of people instantly going to be like, Darkworld, this is not the format for you. And I completely agree. With Droll and of course D-Shifter running around, it is very, very difficult for this deck to function at its max potential. However, the build that I've gone with has given it the best ability and the best shot in order to do so. There's a couple of different techs that I will talk about as I get to them, and a card that involves this guy right here in the extra deck. Whether you want to be putting that in the main deck or the side deck is entirely up to you. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. With all of that out of the way, I'm going to dive headfirst into the profile, show you what we've got, and as always, explain why we've got it. So I'm just going to blitz through the standard lineup of Darkworlds. No matter what version of the build you are playing, in my opinion, 99.999% of the time, it will have these exact ratios. Double Grepher, Triple Snow, Rainbow, and of course, Genta. Then in this particular version, I've gone with 2 Cerulei and the 1 Silver. Now, what I've kind of done is I've tried to minimize the overall goal of this deck. Now, the overall goal of the deck is go first, protect against Droll and Shifter. More so, Droll is a lot easier to kind of protect against when you're comparing the two. Whereas if they drop Shifter on you, you're like, okay, guess I've got to get to Baguska and then pass and hold the turn out. Whereas with Droll, you have a couple of different ways that you can play around it because you technically control when you give your opponent the ability to use Droll on you. So keep that in mind. So ultimately, the reason I'm not playing Gold and I'm not playing the original Rainbow is I'm not going down the colourless route on this one, unfortunately. Colours is good for going second, but the brick of playing colours in the main deck is very, very damaging when you're trying to minimise your deck in order to utilise as much free space and as many competitive cards as you possibly can. The double Cerulei is for those times where you might not want to search it out, but being able to access it earlier does then unlock a couple of cards in the main deck as well. So the card that I'm playing, in my opinion, is the best single card that allows you to deal with mainly Droll and Lockbird because you can play it before they even activate it. Whereas in regards to something like D-Shifter, not so much a clever player, but a more experienced player will drop Shifter at the start of the turn before you can do anything at all, and that's where it becomes a lot difficult to play around. However, when you're looking at the main meta with Droll and Lockbird coming in from the side deck 99.9% of the time, or at least 80% if not more being in the main deck, you need to play a card that allows you to protect against it, and the one I've gone with is Quackimiru Guardian. Now, a lot of people actually said in regards to Quackimiru Guardian, the one they would prefer is the Nightmare card, which is a Fiend monster. However, the issue with it, and a lot of people have missed this, even myself at the start, is that it is mandatory. And I believe it's like something Nightmare. It's mandatory, so it will negate your monster effect as well, which is why you want to go with Quackimiru Guardian. Quackimiru Guardian also acts as a level 4, which can be useful for you should you get double hand trapped. You can still normal summon Quackimiru and then get another level 4 to the board, and that gives you access to Baguska, which unfortunately is your next best option. Another one that I prefer to help me protect against hand traps is of course Instant Fusion, and again the reason that I go with Instant Fusion over Call by the Grave is because with Instant Fusion I can set it and still activate it, as well as being able to activate it to set up a Millennium Eyes Restrict before my opponent goes into Droll. Now, of course, there are other ways you can do it, and the argument I've had a couple of times in regards to Call by the Grave is a lot of people are like, well, you just activate Genta, and that's usually where they Droll you, and you can chain Call by the Grave. Yes, very true, but when Call by the Grave can be utilised in specific scenarios like that, Instant Fusion can be utilised whether you've opened up a hand of dangers or not. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to reveal a danger and then hit the Call by the Grave. I know it's a slim chance, but if you were to take Instant Fusion in the place of Call by the Grave and say, right, okay, do a danger test hand and I've opened up Call by the Grave, you're probably going to want to set it rather than making that risk of discarding it. Whereas with Instant Fusion, you can either set it or activate it at that exact moment in time, giving you the protection from Droll regardless. So this can protect you in the scenario of the Genta, it can protect you in the scenario of the dangers, it can protect you in 99.9% of the times when you are searching. Now, Shifter, on the other hand, is a lot more difficult to deal with unless you are going to punish a bad player, which means they let you get to the main phase, so they let you conduct your normal summon, and then straight away it's like, Shifter. It's like, okay, cool, Quackimiru Guardian, negate, done with it. Instant Fusion, into Millennium Eyes, done with it. More times than not, if you activate Instant Fusion, they're probably going to chain Shifter, and then you can't protect against it. So the only way you can really deal with Shifter, unfortunately, is with the Baguska. Yes, of course, Call by the Grave in that scenario would be a lot better for you. So that's something you could probably side in if you want to. But honestly, these are the 4 best cards, in my opinion, that help you deal with it. Yes, Tour Guide is effective because it gets you into the number 75, but again, the issue with that is when you're activating Tour Guide, you need to make sure that it bypasses Imperms, Veilers, and Ashes, whereas Quacky Mirror Guardian, you just normal summon it. Yes, if they've got a Veiler or an Imperm, they can still negate a Quacky Mirror Guardian, but it still gives you a level 4 on the board that is going to be more successful for you, and in place of the Gossip Shadow, that's where Instant Fusion comes in for the Millennium Eyes Restrict. Hopefully I've explained that as much detail as possible. Any questions, put them in the comments down below. I know people have different ways of trying to play around it. What I'm trying to say to you guys is, this, in my opinion, is the most consistent and most successful way to play around those particular hand traps that we are most fearful of in the form of Droll and Shifter with the most success. Then, of course, for the dangers, we do play double Mothman, double Nessie, one Jackalope, Bigfoot, and, of course, Chupacabra. Now, one thing that needs to be mentioned, most people that have played Dangers for a longer period of time, is you can still activate Dangers under Droll and Lockbird. The only difference is you will not gain any advantage off the back of them, apart from putting the monster onto the board. Unless you discard a card, something like Bigfoot, that you want to pop a card, or Chupacabra to revive. Mothman, obviously, you wouldn't get the effect if it's discarded. Jackalope, you would, and Nessie, you wouldn't. So keep that in mind, and the reason that you can keep doing that is because the outcome of danger is not guaranteed, so it allows you to keep revealing. All that would happen is reveal, discard, goes to the grave. Like, unless you're getting an advantage to summon a card or place a card on the field, you're not going to be able to play around Droll, so keep that in mind. We are still playing the one Salamander Catalyzer. I just like the idea, again, trying to play around D-Shifter, trying to play around Droll and Lockbird. This can help you more consistently get you into Bagooska. So what I'm trying to say, like, I'm not saying that this is the best deck, meta toppling, anti-meta, you name it, for this format, but if you still want to be playing Dark Worlds in this format, you need to be able to play as many cards as possible to help you play against and protect. I know a lot of people are instantly going to go, well, what about Drag Down to the Grave? The issue with Drag Down to the Grave is it doesn't guarantee you to negate or protect against a Droll and Lockbird. Yes, of course, you can activate Drag Down to the Grave. You could look at their hand, you get full knowledge, you rip one from it, they will then rip one from your hand. But if they draw into another Droll and Lockbird, the outcome's exactly the same. If they don't even have Droll and Lockbird in their hand and then draw into it, again, you're locked out. Whereas if you're telling me, well, put 3 Drag Down to the Grave in instead of the 3 Quacky Mirror Guardian, arguably, I'd say I'd much rather have the Quacky Mirror Guardian than the Drag Down. So, again, personal preference. Some people might want the Drag Down. By all means, go for it. But as I'm trying to explain on that one, the outcome is not guaranteed. Whereas I know 100% of the time, if my opponent only has Droll against my Quacky Mirror Guardian, I will protect it. Whereas if my opponent has Droll with Drag Down to the Grave, there is no guarantee they won't draw into another one. There is no guarantee that they even have it in their hand in the first place. Not to mention that Quacky Mirror Guardian can help you deal with other cards as well. Then for the spells, 2 Gate of the Dark World. This is just my personal preference. I know people play it at 3. I understand why they play it at 3. I don't like it at 3. That's just personal preference. Not much more needs to be said about that. 1 Archives, you could hardly cut this if you wanted to. I just still like that ability to be able to trigger your Dark Worlds later on in the turn, get additional draws and everything else you need. 2 Dark Corridor. Now, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. So, the reason I'm going to show you Dark Corridor first, and then I've got 2 Trill Tactics Talents and 1 Trill Tactics Thrust, and of course 1 Card Destruction, is these are all targets that Thrust can set through the deck. Some people don't like Card Destruction. That's down to personal preference. I still really, really like it. The 2 Corridor and the 2 Talents is kind of interesting to me, and more so for the Talents than the Corridor is I don't mind opening this up. If I open it, it's another way to punish my opponent if they D-shifter me or if they Droll me. Because I would ultimately wouldn't go for the draw because there's no point in that unless I desperately need to get to Bagooska. I'd much rather look at their hand, take away one of their combo pieces, and then hope that they don't have enough to keep on going. Obviously, you wouldn't want to go for Dark Corridor if that happens, and you probably wouldn't, or more times than not, you definitely wouldn't want to be going for Card Destruction. So the reason I've changed this around and gone with a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 rather than a 2 and a 1-1 is for the pure fact that I don't mind opening this up. If I open up multiples of this, it becomes a little bit dead. Whereas if I open up 1 Talents and Thrust, I know my Thrust can lead me to either of these should I want to extend my combo. And like I said, the reason for this is to punish players that are going to Droll you or are going to shift at you with max outcome. The last 2 spells we play is the 1 Accession and the 1 Puppetry. Now, you don't have to play Puppetry. Again, I just like this as an option that if I draw this for turn or if I have this in my turn and my opponents are trying to activate stuff during the standby phase, I can draw phase Puppetry, get rid of them. And because I'm doing this during the draw phase, if I do discard a Dark World that's going to allow me to search, again, it allows me to play around Droll and Lockbird, which can be very, very helpful. It's another one of them cards, if you do get Drolled, if you do get shifted, you can set this, less so shifted, but more so even if you do get Drolled, you can set this past your opponent and then still activate this and try to trigger off your Dark Worlds during your opponent's turn. Obviously, it's not going to be absolutely broken or fail-safe, but it still gives you that option to banish from the graveyard as a quick play effect and then gain advantage off the back of it. The last card we're playing is Fenrir. It's just a really good go first, go second card. Again, a lot of people don't like this, but the idea is, special summon down Fenrir. You're not going to use this effect to search instantly, as much as you'll be tempted to do that. You would special summon down Fenrir, then activate a search effect, and then if you got drolled, at least you have the ability to go into a Link 2 like SP Little Knight, and that's just going to give you another form of interruption during your opponent's turn when you are trying to play around with the strongest floodgate hand traps that really do hurt your deck. This can be free spots of anything you want in particular. I just feel that Fenrir is the best kind of go first, go second card that can help you utilize against your opponent. Yes, you could very easily consider something like Super Poly, as you do have a little bit of flex spot in the extra deck if you want to, but that really does come down to the environment and your playstyle. Moving on to the extra deck, of course, we are playing 2 of the Greffa Dragon Overlord of the Dark World. You probably don't need to play 2, but you have the ability to recycle the Accession, so you can use it twice. Once you've activated once, and by the time you get to this, it can be very, very helpful. Not to mention, if you do hard open the Accession and a way to make this, which would require Accession, plus a Dark World, plus Greffa, you can make this, and this becomes another form of protection to deal with Droll. Technically, it can deal with Shifter, but if you're activating Accession, they're definitely chaining Shifter. And then, of course, you've got Millennium Eyes Restrict. Straightforward on that one. For the XYZs, we've got Baguska. This one you should never want to go into this through your combo plays. The only time you'll ever want to go into this is if you're drolled or shifted, and it is your defensive mechanism to try and hold the game out until those lingering effects of droll and shifter wear out. 60, Daguerres. Obviously, this is your ability to draw cards, trigger your discard effects and everything else you need to. And the Typhoon. A lot of people say, well, if you put this on the board when you have the field spell, it becomes stronger, so it can't use its bounce effect. And I say to that, that's absolutely fine, because more times than not, when you're playing Typhoon, the reason you're doing it is because you want to deal with something like a Zeus. Whereas ultimately, I don't want to bounce a Zeus back. Once I make this and it's stronger than Zeus, I'll just attack it and kill it. So that's kind of what you want to go for there. Then, of course, we've got the one Kroshik, the one Akashic, pretty standard on this one. SP Little Knight, Dark the Dark Charmer, IP Masquerina, Muckcracker, Appaloosa, Skull Dread, and then Underworld Goddess. Now, this can very easily be Zelantis if you want to do it, for the pure fact that you will turn your Skull Dread into Zelantis. And the reason that that works is that then gives you your Muckcracker combo where you lock yourself into Fiends, use Zelantis, clear the entire board, and then you can only bring back Fiends, which means you clear off your opponent's entire board, which is actually very, very effective. So that's something that I would consider in place of Underworld Goddess if you want it. I'm just trying it out to see, at my environment, what is more successful for me, Underworld Goddess or Zelantis. More times than not, Zelantis could be better, but again, it still requires you to get into the Muckcracker, use his effect. By the time you're doing that, the only time you'd want to use Zelantis is if you've burnt out a lot of your opponent's resource or their negates, and you're just trying to clear the board off, bring it back, and then push for an OTK. So it's one of them grinded kind of options, whereas this allows you to deal with floodgates in the form of stuff like the Raid Raptors that are running around with the Ultimate Falcons and everything else. So it's entirely up to you. You could take out Appaloosa if you don't want to be as defensive, but I feel that everything else is relatively required for this deck. Baguska, like I said, is the full fail-safe. Daguerres just triggers your effect, so it kind of helps you with brick cans as well when you don't want to be going down the Baguska route. Moving on to a side deck. So this is just a demo side deck. You don't have to do this card for card, but this just gives you a couple of options to think about. One of the spicy techs I want you guys to kind of think about and consider is Mask Change 2 into Darklaw. Now, the reason this is so cool is your Mask Change 2, unfortunately, it discards as cost, so it doesn't trigger your Dark World effects, but what Mask Change 2 will allow you to do is it will allow you to upgrade stuff like Chupacabra, Jackalope, Mothman, once I find it, Silver, Snow, Genta, trying to go back through the deck, Mothman, and Ceruli, all into a Darklaw. Now, when this format is so anti-meted, like the best tactic for an anti-meta is to take away your opponent's graveyard. Like, when you have access to a card like Darklaw in your deck, or the ability to make Darklaw quite easily, is very, very good. So for those of you unfamiliar with Mask Change 2, it's quick play. You discard a card to target a face-on monster you control that has a level. Send it to the graveyard. After that, if it left the field by this effect, you get to special summon the extra deck a masked hero monster with the same attribute but a higher level than the monster that you tributed. This will then give you the ability to basically get into Darklaw, which for those of you unfamiliar with Darklaw, any card added to the hand, or if your opponent adds a card from their deck to the hand, you can use Dark Claw's effect to randomly banish a card from the hand, but then any card sent to their graveyard is banished instead. So straight away, it's a great anti-meta option against the Fire King matchup, and on top of that, very few people are really going to expect it. You can use it in the main deck or you can side it. The issue is it's just such a card that is ideal for going first, not so great for going second, for the pure fact that by the time you're trying to get into Dark Claw, it's really more of a try to dodge a target effect. And even then, your targeted effects on your monsters are pretty irrelevant because all of the ones I showed you are all activating in the hand, resolving on the field, activating in the graveyard, resolving on the field. So like none of them can actually be impermed or targeted. So that's where it's a little bit more of a win con. But the idea is that during your opponent's turn, if you leave a silver on the board, set a Master Change 2. During their turn, flip the Master Change 2, turn your silver into a Dark Claw, and then straight away, if they're still only playing with 2, if not 1 card because you've completed the hand rip, it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to do that. And if they've been able to stop your hand rip, all you need to do is, again, quite like an anti-meta option if you do get drolled or shifted, is you can summon one of your level 4s in the form of Snow. So like literally, let's say you go Genta and they go Shifter or they go Droll. You go, okay, cool. Normal summon a level 4 monster, set a Master Change 2, pass to them turn, activate Master Change 2, turn the Genta into a Dark Claw, and at least you have some form of resistance against them that they may not be expecting. Whether you want to put this in the main is entirely up to you. I like the idea of it, but you do have to hard draw this, unfortunately, and that's where you're probably going to be digging for this a little bit more, but you should be able to do that naturally in a Dark World deck anyway. For the actual side deck cards, of course, we are playing the 1 Eradicator, followed up by Harpies and 2 Lightning Storms to deal with back row. You can make your normal spell cards a little bit more consistent, and that's why I'm only showing you off 1 evenly matched and 1 Dark World no more, because you could put in a second Triple Tactics Talents, Frost, sorry. And the reason that we play Frost and Talents is because Dark World is probably one of the very few decks that can make sure your opponent triggers a monster effect when you give them Ceruli. Other decks obviously wait for them to use a hand trap and then they trigger the Talents or the Frost off of them. Whereas in Dark World, you give them a monster so you can set or add off of Frost. And then, of course, you can obviously Talents to still look at the hand, do whatever you need to. So that's the reason we play it. Triple Lava Golem, like you would... Honestly, if you feel you need to break a board and you feel they're either going to side out Droll or they're not going to use Droll, or even if they do Droll you, you still Lava Golem then, and then you shift it to defense by going into your Baguska play. You're in a good position that way. Cosmic Cyclone to help you deal with quick play Floodgates or anything else like the Fire King Field spell. Double DD Crow and then double Nibiru. So again, up to you. You can max any of these out on freeze. You can double them up. You can change them around. These are just like examples of some of the cards you may or may not use for the upcoming format. Yes, of course, you could put Dry and Lockbird into the deck as well if you wanted to. It really depends on your local environment and what you want to play against and how you want to deal with it. Of course, you could highly consider Crossout Designator if you want to, but I feel it has the same issue as Call by the Grave in that you want to set it. You can't guarantee that every single hand you have is going to allow you to resolve it successfully, especially when there is a danger in the hand. And then it would also mean that you now need to start playing the hand traps, which when you draw through a lot of cards, you want to make sure you don't draw into the hand traps, but you draw into your Crossout Designator. So there's a lot more risk with a very little reward off of the back of playing it in comparison to some of the other cards that I do choose to play. So that's pretty much it for the Dark World update. I know Dark World is what Dark World is. A lot of people will have their different opinions for this build, and that's absolutely fine. This is just what works the best for me. These are a couple of options that I wanted to give you all so that you had an understanding and give you as much depth and detail as to why I choose to play it this way and my reasoning behind it. Again, if you don't like it and you want to play it a different way, by all means, go for it. I'm always open to constructive feedback. Don't be like, oh, this list is crap. It's like, okay, but why? Why do you think it's crap? Oh, because you do this and do this. And I'm like, okay, valuable argument. Or because you do this and this, it's like, but have you thought about this and this? Like, let's have a conversation, people. Come on. Anyway, love Dark World. Always nice to see it. Like, you kind of want to see it around. Again, quite like the previous format where Droll was drifting around. It's not the best format for it. But if Dark World is your baby and it's the only deck you have and you want to play it regardless, this, in my opinion, not the exact build, but playing Kokimiru Guardian and Instant Fusion is probably the best way with the most success rate to protect you from Droll and Lockbird going forward. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.